got a lot to cover in a very short period of time. I'm going to get a little things going. I'm going to give you guys time to file in here. I know our normal start times is at 1 p.m. Central Time. We are starting late because this timing chain fought us. We got started earlier in the morning and we're just getting it to the point that covers are ready to go back on. I wanted to make sure we got to this point to make sure that the timing was right before I made this video. I did not want to make this and then things were not right for you guys. So anyone who missed that was waiting at the 1 p.m. time, hopefully you guys will come back and catch this. So again, I want to thank you guys for being here today. I know we're starting late, but we're going to get into this. The topic today is on 2.4 liter GM engines, and we're talking about the timing. So let me get into announcements. And as always, guys, if my mods are here, make sure you guys chat in. I do not have my editor in my ear today, so I'm kind of flying a little bit blind, and I'm going to be requiring my mods to kind of help out as much as possible today. So announcements. Thank you guys for all the support. We are growing really well. I'm very happy with the progress that we're making. You guys are hitting that like button. You guys are hitting the subscribe button. It means a lot to the channel. It really does help us build and help us grow. We have some big things coming this year yet. We did vote on the engine or rebuild engine for Crimson Vortec. That vote went well, and we will be doing that after we finish Malibu Steel. Malibu Steel, we're in the middle of doing this engine project that you guys are about to see, and I'm going to go through the timing and everything that you guys need to know. And we're also fixing the bumper from the deer hit. So as we get into this, guys, again, thank you for your support. I just wanted to say that right now. It really does help build the channel, grow the channel. If you guys got any chats, this one I'm going to be more verbal and I'll be able to watch the screen a little bit more. So please chat in. The more chats we get, the more engagement we get, the better it is. So where are we at? We are at a bumper repair, and we don't want to put the bumper back together until we fix this timing chain mess. GMs, at least the 2.4 liters, have a bad problem. And just so you guys know, we are going to be doing news after. I've got some very, very nasty news about GM. So you guys are going to want to stick around to the end. There's a bunch of stuff coming up that is about GM kind of going off the rails, and they're doubling down on things they shouldn't double down on. So that being said, I'll save that for the end. When dealing with timing, it's important that you get the timing right. You want to make sure that everything is put back the way it was before you took it apart, and then turn the motor over to make sure you get full revolutions and you do not hit the valves. This is one area where people make mistakes when doing timing chains. And on a 2.4 liter, the chains do stretch. And unfortunately, they do stretch quite a bit. Unfortunately, that mile range for this timing chain is about 130 to 160. You are pushing it after that 130 range. So you get about 130,000 miles on it. It's time to do a timing chain on these Malibus, on anything with the 2.4 liter engine. The reason for that is those chains stretch and also the guides break. I'm going to be showing you guys some pieces. I'm going to be showing you guys some parts. Now, a lot of the stuff I'm showing you is stuff I've already taken out. There is a service bulletin update that I will be covering in this video so that you guys know that there's a service bulletin that you need to do that upgrade in order to make sure that your next service interval, you can extend your mileage a little bit farther. Some of the issue with the timing chains is that the guides break. And when the guides break, what happens is it actually causes the chain to kind of catch and run on a bolt that's inside. The service update removes that inner bolt and runs a large outer bolt. And I'll show you guys where that is. And that large outer bolt has a stub on it. That stub is what goes through that plastic guide. And I'll show you guys exactly what I'm talking about You can get that part at Napa, and I will be showing the box, so you guys will have that part number here in just a bit. Before we get underneath the hood, you guys are going to see a lot of stuff that's a part that is different from last week. So just know that you guys are coming into a project that we've already tore down, and we're already in the reassembly phase. And the reason I did it this way is I needed to show you guys the timing. The timing was the most important part to this. Valve cover, you guys have seen me do valve covers. You guys have seen me pull coil packs. You guys have seen me do spark plugs. I've already got lives out for that, and I've already done, you know, a bunch of different stuff on that stuff. What you guys haven't seen me do is the internals. And I did bring in somebody who does a lot of these timing chains, so he was very familiar in it. He's helped me with many different projects in the past, and I may have him on for other videos. He's a little camera shy, so I don't know if I'll actually be able to get him on with us. But at some point, hopefully, he'll be willing to do projects in here as I'm recording. So we'll see how that goes. I got a lot more talking to do to him on that. But that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Let's get underneath this thing. I'm going to show you guys what I've taken apart. We're going to walk backwards through this process. And as we walk backwards through it, then I can show you guys all of the important updates and things you need to know. Torque specs, always look up your torque specs. Now the cam phasers are really weird. It's hard to find a proper torque spec on the cam phasers. So if you do happen to find those torque specs on that, make sure you guys drop that information in the chat down below. I've just activated the chat to see all chats. So now I should be able to see everything you guys chat in. Let's go ahead and walk this backwards. I want you guys to see what's going on. I don't think I've got my internet connection set up fully. Let me fix that. I'm working on it. Give me just a second, everybody. All right, there. Now I've got a solid internet connection. You guys should notice that it's probably not as choppy. It's a little bit shaky because I'm trying to move around here, but okay, let me flip you around and we're going to start looking underneath the hood of this thing. All right, so here we are. We are tore down, guys. This is a full stripped down engine compartment when it comes to doing timing. You will need to remove your air box. You will have one bolt in the back right there. And you will have to lift that box out at a weird angle around this AC line. Try not to hit this AC line or press against it. You can bend it and you can kink it real easy. Guys, we have 10 people in here. Please hit that like button. Let's get that up because that helps with the engagement. All right, next you guys will notice that I removed that snorkel piece. This is the actual intake, which has a sensor on it that we have to disconnect. My wiring harness is currently laying down here out of the way. I didn't want anything hanging over the top of the engine because you don't want anything to drop into that engine. Right now my spark plugs are out because we needed to turn the engine over. And yes, I put the E3 spark plugs in this engine and I was averaging 31 miles to the gallon on a car that only gets factory, it's about 27. So E3 spark plugs actually work, guys. It's worth the money to put the E3s in it if you're trying to get fuel mileage out of a vehicle. I can tell you the next time we go to do plugs in that one over there, which is Champagne Bubbles, it will get E3 spark plugs. I'm telling you guys that right now. It will happen. So after we removed all of our electronic lines, we removed our coil packs, our plugs, our valve cover, we were then ready to start on the cam phasers themselves. And in order to do this, it's not that you're going to be pulling the cam phasers, but you will need to take them up off, even if you're doing the timing chain, because you need to slide them around in order to get the chain to line up properly. The way to do this so that you don't have an issue is to actually put a wrench, and the wrench size is a 5/16. Right here, there is a hex style head here and a hex style head here. You can put those wrenches in at a cross angle, so one going this way, one going this way, and you can vice grip those together. Once you lock those together, you do not want to remove that. You want to leave those wrenches in there. And I'm missing a few things that we took apart here because I'm going to get to those in just a bit. But once you've locked the wrenches, then your timing will not move. But these cams do have to get loosened up. You have to loosen this bolt here and this one here, because you are going to have to move these around and remove these to get one of the slides out that's inside of here. You guys will see it once we go down below where that slide is. So now we've got the new ones in. Even this is a brand new guide. Do not reuse your guides. When you buy these kits, make sure that you use what comes in the kit. So whatever you do, do not reuse your guides. Your guides get wore out, which causes chain slap. That chain slap is what can cause your timing chain to jump. When we took this apart, this chain was extremely loose. I was able to move this chain up and down. We were almost at the point of this chain jumping. If this chain were to jump for any reason, it destroys the engine. You will smash the valves against the piston and destroy a $2,000 engine. This is a must-do repair, and you need to do it before that 150,000, maybe 140. This car has 144 on it right now. So at 144,000, we're already doing timing chains. Unfortunately, this is the negative side of automotive. Parts are not made like they're used to. These chains are put in weird angles, and because the chains are in weird angles, what happens is they tend to stretch and wear out. That also includes the guides. So what we had to do is we had to pull our motor mount out, completely out. We needed it out and away. There's a really long bolt that we need to lower the motor in order to get the bolt in for the cover. The cover is actually part of the oil pump. So we'll look at that cover in just a bit, and we can kind of go over what that cover does and kind of what the purpose of that cover is. As far as the valve cover is just a basic valve cover. There's nothing crazy about that valve cover. The thing that is crazy about this is that cover right there for the oil pump. So it has the oil pump in it, and it's the cover, and it's hidden all behind the harmonic balancer. I'm going to cover the timing marks, and I'm going to cover the guides that got installed and that small little oil piece right there in the middle in just a bit. What I want to do is cover this oil pump right here. So this is my front cover. Underneath it is the valve cover. This gasket here you have to remove and then clean that surface. So we still have to do the cleaning here. We have to get that surface all cleaned up. Here is your oil pump. This runs off of the cam gear, or off of the crank. Sorry, not cam, crank. So there's a keyway in here. That keyway is what allows this pump to turn. If you're missing the key, it won't turn the oil pump and you'll burn up your engine. So make sure that key is in the crankshaft before you put this all back together. We're going to put a new seal on this after we clean this up, but this is the oil pump. It's weird. I'm used to older school engines where that oil pump is located down inside the oil pan. That's not the case anymore. Valve cover, we're not going to reuse this valve cover. It's not that this valve cover is a bad one. That valve cover is actually a one-piece aluminum, which is not a bad cover. But we're gonna go with something a little bit more shinier, something a little bit cleaner. So this is what we're going to use when we put it back together. And it'll work a lot better for us just because it'll save us the time of having to clean this up. So rather than cleaning that up, all we'll need to do is clean this surface, and then we can put that seal back on and that pump can go back on. Before I do that though, bring you guys back over here. All right. So you have to do something a little risky when doing timing chains. I don't recommend this, but you kind of don't have a choice if you don't have a hoist and a proper lift. You have to support your engine on boards across your oil pan. You want to be careful not to knock that off the oil pan. If you knock the engine off of the jack, you could wreck the oil pan and you'd have to put in an oil pan. A friend of mine has done that to where they've wrecked the oil pan and had to put a new one on. Very frustrating, very time consuming, gets to be a lot more expensive than what you initially wanted to do. So in the kit, we get this guide here. We get this guide, which goes all the way up. And we get this little oil sprayer. You have to replace the oil sprayer when you do this kit. You want to buy this entire thing as a kit. And I will show you guys the part numbers here in just a bit. That kit also comes with the gear and the chain. So there are marks here, and I'm going to try to bring you in without having the light behind me kind of mess me up. So there is a mark right here, almost like a weld mark. This has to line up with that mark right there. This is on the crankshaft. Okay, you're going to slide this gear on. This gear has a mark right here, and this is a dark colored lock for your cam, or for the basically for your timing gear. Timing chain. So a dark color here. This one lines up. So we want this to line up. We want this to line up. Those are your marks for your crankshaft. Up on top now, your cam gears have a different set of marks. Again, we have a dark colored lock here, and there's a diamond shape in the gear right here. So these line up, and you'll be able to see it a little bit better right here. So there's our diamond that I just talked about. This one is a gold lock for the chain itself. This is your main timing mark, which is the gold one, which goes on your front gear. Your back one will have that dark color that matches the bottom. These two marks make sure that your cam is in the proper phase. If the cam is not set right before you start, you will damage the engine when you go to fire it up. So make sure that these timing marks are correct. Take the time to turn this engine over. We did turn this one over, and it took about 35 turns to get it back into spec on the marks once we got everything put together and we were checking to make sure that we were good. What happens is, as it turns over, the chain does walk a little bit, and it'll walk until it walks back into proper markings. Do not ever tear an engine apart on timing until you've lined up all your marks. Until you've lined up this one here, which is like a weld in the casting, to this mark here, which is on the crankshaft. This is on the cam or crank gear, and that's your mark there, which is this darker, and you want it to be right in between, right in the middle of that. And then line up your mark on this one with the diamond, this one with the diamond. And as long as those marks are in place, you're good to go. So let's talk about the service bulletin real quick. The service bulletin pertains to this right here. Guys, this is the most important part right here to this repair, to make sure that your engine will be better for the future. This little bolt right here with the hex pattern in it is basically a good failure point for this entire engine. Let me show you the guides. Set you guys up here. All right. So let me show you guys the guides, and we can talk about these guides and get a better feel for what's going on with this thing. So when we do the engine teardown, guys, I'm going to be very meticulous. I'm going to take my time, and I'm going to do each step with you when I get the motor for Crimson Vortex. So this might feel a little rushed because I'm in a hurry to finish this thing so that we can get that engine. The reason that I'm pushing this one a little bit harder is it is very time sensitive to get this thing where I need it to be. So I'm going to grab the old guides. These are all the old ones. I'm going to show you the service bulletin and why this kit is so important. And you need to buy the full kit and make sure that you have somebody install it that's already done one of these. So what happens is normally this guide is the one that breaks. What happens is it snaps this ear off because the chain rides on this side of it. And it's putting constant pressure against that chain as the chain goes around, and it comes up and then goes around that top cam. So it goes across that front cam that we looked at with the gold marker on the chain. What happens is this one snaps. Behind this bolt, basically right here, this basic bolt, this isn't what you're putting back in, is this bolt right here. This bolt goes in here like so, right here. What happens is when this ear breaks off, that chain will come and catch that bolt head right here, catches that bolt head, and it rides on that bolt head. And it'll actually wear this head completely down till the chain can slip past. Once it slips past, it's too late. Your engine is done. You'll be putting in a new engine. And oftentimes, if it breaks the ear on this, that is enough inertia to force the chain to basically shear the head of that bolt off. The service bulletin replaces this bolt right here and puts a nub on this, almost like a stud. And what that does is it basically locks the two together like this. And now you don't have these threads going in. You don't need these threads. This goes into the head and this holds tight. This will hold that guide and keep that guide from breaking. If you don't do the service bulletin, and guys, this isn't a GM recall thing, so you can't get GM to pay for this. This is something you have to do when you do the repair. I'll show you guys that part number right now. Okay. Yeah, you guys are going to tell me that this is backwards. So let me do it this way. All right. So now it's not going to be backwards for you guys. This is the Dorman bolt that you're going to replace. And what this does is this bolt has that little stub on it. That stub will fix the issue of breaking those guides. So there's your part numbers. And I'm going to get you guys the part numbers right now for the timing chain kit. Okay, I'm going to flip you guys around and show you guys this one. All right, here is your timing chain kit right here. So there's the part number for that. It's important to buy these as full kits and install them as full kits. Don't think that you just need to get pieces and bits and pieces and you're good. That isn't how this works. You will also need the timing chain covered gasket. That is not included in this kit. You will need a valve cover gasket set. That means you need the full valve cover gasket. On this engine, there are two main gaskets that seal around the spark plugs and around the outside of the cover. Then you also need the rubber grommets that hold the valve cover down. If you don't replace those grommets, what happens is it doesn't have enough pressure to hold your valve cover tight. That valve cover has to be torqued down. And I believe it's like 75 inch-pounds. It's something like that. I know I had somebody look it up for me on a 1.4 liter when we did the valve cover on a customer vehicle that we did on the channel here. So I know that we did one already like that. Guys, get the likes up, please. Help get this out here so that we can keep sharing content like this. I'm going to have some news at the end, and it's going to be some big news when it comes to GM stuff. So if you guys got GMs, make sure you stick around to the end. I also will cover a few other things going on in the news, automotive-wise, especially for repair shops. So, guys, you don't want to miss the news at the end of this. If you guys got any questions, feel free to chat them in down below. Let me grab the grommets. I want to show you guys these because it's really important. All right, here we go. Okay, so these are the grommets. These grommets hold your valve cover down. If you don't replace these, what happens is it causes a leak. And the reason it causes a leak is because the valve cover doesn't go tight enough, because these have been squished once already. And oftentimes these have been in the vehicle for so long. Try to do this without stabbing myself here. These grommets have usually been in the vehicle for so long that you don't want to reuse these when you're doing a project like this. It's better to take and replace these grommets. These are a pain, and you have like 13 of them that you have to do, so it is frustrating. But it's worth it to know that you're not going to have an oil leak when you bolt that valve cover back on. This is one that's already been used. This is squished, meaning that this isn't going to give you a good torque if you torque it back down. What's going to happen is as you torque it down, the gasket's not going to seal tight like it did from factory, because these grommets get squished and they cannot be reused. The valve cover gasket set comes with the new grommets. These are the ones we want to use. And I'm going to show you, it's very minor, how much this makes a difference when it comes to sealing this up. So, here's this one. And it went all the way underneath. Give me a minute here, guys. Normally, I wouldn't have bothered chasing this because this was the used one, but I need to show you guys. So here's the used one. Here's the new one. There is a very slight difference in height on these. That slight height difference is the difference between your new valve cover gasket sealing and leaking. It really is that important. And you can try to force the new one on there, or you squirt a little WD-40 and they pop right on. The harder part is getting the old ones off. Like I said, I have 13 of these to do, so I'm not going to do them all here on camera for you guys today. That's tedious, and I can do that work after the camera's off, but There you go. This is with the new one on here. And I can see a clear difference in the thickness here. So when I go to tighten this one down, it's going to squish this grommet and it's going to squish the rubber seal on the valve cover. This is what we want. This is how we know that it's going to seal up. And without this, there's very little chance to get a very good seal on your valve cover. I don't reuse rubber grommets ever when it comes to valve covers. It'll leak every single time. So the new valve cover, these grommets don't fit in there very well. So what I'm going to do is probably place the valve cover down on after I've cleaned all my surfaces. Then I will push these down on top and then put the bolts in. I'll finger tighten those bolts. Again, you're going into an aluminum head. Do not just get on it with a wrench and start going crazy, because if you start cross-threading on aluminum, you're too late. You're going to keep cross-threading. Again, I bought the tap and die set for a reason. It's not that I necessarily want to use it. So if I don't need it, I'm not going to do something that will create me to have to use it. But if I do feel that one is sticky or isn't going in very well, I will grab my tap and die and just clean out the threads real quick. I'll probably check those with just a normal one, just run a bolt through. The only problem is you don't want to drop that bolt into the engine, because you do have to go fishing for it. You do have to get it out. You can't just leave bolts laying in an engine. If you ever drop something inside, you have to go after it. That being said, I don't want to leave my spark plugs open any longer than I have to. I will cover torque specs on spark plugs for you guys real quick. So anything that is about 16 foot-pounds or 18 foot-pounds is what you want to torque your spark plugs down to. What that does is it seals up your cylinder and makes sure that your compression stays good. If you have compression escaping from an engine, you're going to lose fuel mileage, and you're also going to have other engine problems. So it's better to make sure you get this stuff torqued down. Find your torque specs. They're online all over the place. Look up your engine. Look for torque specs on your engine. Oftentimes, you'll get a spreadsheet that will have all your torque specs. Spark plugs, valve cover, heads, connecting rods, that'll all be usually in that spreadsheet. Everyone, give me a thumbs up in the chat if this is all making sense to you, or if I need to cover anything else. I want to make sure that you guys have a really good understanding about what's going on here before I go ahead and just kind of move on to my next point here. Guys, make sure you hit that like button. There's 30 of us in here. Let's get the likes up. Bill, good to see you. Awesome, awesome. Bill is one of my mods. He's been around for a long time. I'm pretty sure Bill is over on my Facebook chat as well. So it's good to see my guys in here when they're in here. My wrench squad is very important to what I do. And to show that you want to be a wrench squad member, all you got to do is show that you're actively engaged in the chat and provide some pretty solid information on stuff that we're doing, and I'll wrench you up. It's really that easy, guys. It's not complicated to be part of the wrench squad. So, all right. I'm not getting anything that says that you guys aren't understanding what's going on. So what I'm going to do now is kind of just give this one fold back before we kind of switch off into other topics here. So one fold back that we want to talk about is our harmonic balancer. When we're putting this back in, we want to check that the rubber around our harmonic balancer is in good shape. This one, on the other hand, looks like it's starting to split. This split is horrible, meaning that if this spins and this runs our drive belt, so there is pressure on the outside of this. If this splits, we're not going anywhere. We don't have alternator. We will have a water pump, because the water pump is ran on a chain off of the timing chain set. It's a separate chain on the back side that we don't touch. The only time we do that chain is if we have to do a water pump. And water pumps are not common to do on these engines. So we normally don't even touch the water pump chain, and we don't get into it because that chain is problematic. It's really difficult to get that all put back together and get it to seal up and not leak. Oftentimes, if it isn't leaking and the pump is working good, we leave it alone. We choose not to go in there for a water pump if we're just doing the timing chain, because most of the chains that break are basically going to be that main timing chain. That's the big one. So always check this. If you notice that this rubber is starting to tear, then replace it. Don't put this back on. It's for the little bit that this costs you, it's well worth it to spend the money. So I usually just spend the little bit, I get this, and I'm good to go. Now, I have a new one, so I'm not worried about this. I'll make sure I don't lose these grommets, because you get exactly the amount of grommets you need in a bag. So don't lose them by accidentally tipping the bag over. We've got one done. I'm not going to cover that again. Let's cover two more guides that you will need to replace. This is one of them. And you will have a bolt that goes through here. This is where your tensioner is. Or as we call them, your grenades. This is your timing chain tensioner right here. I cover this because this is important to know. It is a pretty big deal if you don't keep tension on that chain. The tension on the chain is what keeps your timing in spec. These don't fail very often, but when you go to replace your timing chain set, you always put in a new tensioner. You never reuse these. And these can't be reused. The reason that these can't be reused is there's no way to reset these. And once this plunger pops out, it's junk, because you can't get the threads to grab again to reuse this. And there's no good way to recompress this. There's no spot to put a pin in it. So there's no spot to pin it down. So there's no way that we can reuse this. We cannot lock this back down into place. Yeah. I mean, I can squeeze it by hand, but it's not going to work. So once it's been popped, it's popped, and that's what you got. So the way these work is you thread them in, and then once they're threaded in, they'll grab onto this ear right here. So it sits right here, just like this. This is how our tension is. What you need to do is go in with a pry bar and hammer this tab down. What it does is it pops it so that this provides tension onto the chain. That's an important way to release this one. Some of them have a pin. You pull the pin like a grenade, pull the pin, don't throw it, but pull the pin, and it will pop out. Then those would be set. The ones with the pins, you can recompress them and put the pin back in it. This one doesn't have that pin. So when this one's activated, it's pretty much junk. We're not going to be able to, like I said, recompress this one. And this one actually has a seal around the outside of it too. So we wouldn't want to reuse this without trying to replace this seal. And I'm not sure if that seal, I don't think that seal is going to come off of there anyway. So yeah, would not reuse this one. This is your tensioner for your timing chain. Again, once this is threaded in, you're going to stick a long pry bar down in there. You'll hit the end of the pry bar and it'll shoot out. And when it shoots out, that's when it provides the tension onto this guide. Now, your tension is actually on the back side of the engine. For those that have not done timing chains, let me cover something with you real quick. This is super important. When you're doing timing chains and you have tensioners on your timing chains, all of your slack for the chain needs to be where that tensioner is. I'll show you guys that in just a bit here. But as you get the chain tight and in place, you want to make sure that that slack is where that tensioner is, so that when the tensioner comes out, it puts the pressure to the slack side. If you don't do it this way, the minute you release that tensioner, it can cause all your timing marks to shift. Once your timing marks shift, you got to start all over. Does it come in the kit? Yes, Bill. This tensioner does come in that kit that I gave you guys the part number for. So this tensioner is in there. The only thing that's not in the kit is that specialty bolt that I showed you guys the part number and your gaskets. So you'll need your timing chain cover gasket and valve cover gasket set. Make sure you get the set, not just the valve cover gasket, because just the gasket will only have the gasket and not those rubber grommets that we just talked about. So it will not have these grommets in it. And we want to replace those grommets so we don't have oil leaks. But yes, that tensioner comes in there. The chain comes in there. So here's my old chain, guys. And my old chain was a bit of a problem. And allow me to explain why my old chain was a problem. My old chain only had 2 marks. This is kind of a factory setup here. This is the center of your timing right here on the factory chain. What we did is we marked the chain here with a pen marker, and we marked the chain down here with a pen marker. The reason we did this is we turned the engine over until all of our marks lined up, until everything was lined up. Luckily, we went like 4 times versus the 30 or 35 that it took to get it back after we got our timing done. But we turned it about 3 times and all of our marks lined up. So everything lined up, everything was in spec, it looked beautiful. So we did the pen marker on the other 2 because the factory chain did not have markings on it. The reason we marked that chain is we wanted to make sure before we took it apart that everything was lined up. Once it lined up, we did not feel like turning it over again. We did not want to run the risk of not having it in time. So the best thing that we could do was mark it before we took it apart. And then when we put the new stuff on, we used the marks on the new chain to get it all into place. It worked out great. We've turned this motor over probably about, like I said, 35 or 40 times already. No valve issues. This is something you do want to do. Once you get your timing chain in, you do want to rotate this engine over a couple of times, at least a good solid 3 or 4 times. And the reason for turning it over that much is that you don't run into an issue where the timing chain will cause the valves to move. We don't want the valves to jump out of place and catch a piston. It'll catch it one time and that'll be your last time. That's the way those work. So making sure your marks are right before you start is really crucial to doing timing. And it's a good thing we did because we did have to fight this chain. There was a bunch of things that we took apart that did not go as well as planned. I'm going to get into that in just a bit. But replacing all of your guides is important. This is the last guide that I want to talk about, which is this guy right here. This one holds the chain down between the 2 cam gears. So this just puts a little bit of pressure between the 2 cam gears so that if the chain gets a little loose, it doesn't cause a ripple in the chain to where it could catch that gear and cause it to jump timing. So let me cover the problems we've had with this. So thank you guys for tuning in on this Saturday. I know I'm running late. I know normally we do this at 1 p.m. Central Time. I had to wait and we had to make sure this timing was in spec before I even did this video for you guys. I did not want to bring you guys in and have the timing messed up and trying to explain it to you guys. I wanted to make sure I could show you the marks on where they needed to be. So it was a push to get to this point, but we do have to get this motor tied up. Hopefully I'll get it done yet today. I'll get it sealed up, get it off the jack stand. I don't want to leave an engine on a jack. It's not a safe way to store an engine. I want my motor mount back in to support this engine. So I will be tying this up, but let me show you guys where we struggled in this project. And it'll make sense once I kind of show you guys what's going on. Okay. So here it is. I'm going to try to put you guys up on this egg crate here. So what we had going on when we were putting this chain in, this guide was giving us problems. And this guide, if you try to install it like this, it will not go in. It'll hit. And you would think that this is the way it goes in, that the chain would ride here and come up around the gear, around that gear. It doesn't. It goes in reverse style like this, and it presses against the chain and puts the pressure on the back side of the chain. The chain will ride up off of this tip, and then it comes up over this. This guide is very specific on how it's designed. So there's a cut-in relief here and down here. This is where your bolts go, or that stud would go for the service update. This is the back side of the engine. You need this to be like this so that when those are against the engine, it doesn't catch that chain on the back side here. That secondary chain, I'll show you guys that secondary chain in just a bit. That secondary chain runs your water pump. So if you install this the wrong way, you're going to bind your water pump chain and you could destroy everything in one shot. This is a crucial way to put that bracket in. You do not want to mix it up or try to put it in backwards. It doesn't work. Never force these timing components. These are cheap plastic, and if you force them, you're going to break them. I'm bringing you guys down so I can show you as much of that water pump chain as possible. And again, we're not doing water pumping here. Okay, so this chain back here is your water pump chain. That runs directly off of your crankshaft. You guys saw that we did all of this work here. This one's just in here now because we were using this to turn it over. I'm going to probably pop that out because we can't leave that in there when we're trying to put this cover on. So, and the cover does come with a brand new seal. So if you get the seal kit for this timing chain cover, it will come with a new seal, and we do want to replace that seal. Guys, thank you for tuning in on this Saturday. Please get the likes up, get the subscribes up. It really does help bring the channel up. It does help us to do more content. We've got some engine builds coming here in the future. We got one for Crimson Vortec that we're going to be getting a junkyard engine and doing a complete rebuild on it. And we're going to do it piece by piece. I'm going to find an engine builder that I trust to do my machining. And then I'm going to show you guys how to balance that engine so that it runs like a sewing machine. We're also going to do some little updates when we do that engine to kind of help the longevity of the engine. And there's going to be some stuff that we do that's going to be really important to increasing fuel mileage. It's an older engine style, and because of the age of that engine, we have the ability to do some upgrades. I'll cover those in just a bit. So, again, we can check this timing chain here, but this chain here is just for the water pump. It's a little looser than I care to. I'm going to be showing that to the person that was helping me. That guide's pretty good. This one here is a little loose. So we're going to be looking at that. But oftentimes this water pump one does not, like I said, it does not go bad. Unfortunately, if the seal goes out in that water pump, which is right up there, unfortunately on these newer style engines, when that goes out, it will flush coolant right down into here. And once it gets down into here, it will drop straight into the oil pan. Just on the other side of this, you would see that there's holes that go directly down into the oil pan. So oftentimes when water pumps go in these things, they usually do take the motors out and they turn everything to kind of a cream color, and it washes down your bearings, destroying the engine. And when I go to put this back together, I will be cleaning this up real good. If there's any spots where I notice silicone, like somebody put a little silicone around that oil pan down here, there's a little bit of silicone. I don't want to pick at it too much because I don't want to disturb it. If it's out of the way of my gasket, I'm not really going to get too hyper concerned about it. But I do want to make sure that I get all the oil dripping out. I want to get that cleaned up before that gasket goes on. So this is what the internals look like, where our timing chain is. This is our marks. Like I said, I'm going to be looking at this before we get too carried away. I want to know that this is in good shape. I'm going to guess that this is my tensioner right here for this. And if anything, maybe this tensioner is a little weak, but we don't have oil in it either. So with oil in it, it might put pressure down on this. So that's our tensioner right there for that. If it seems a little weak, then we can get a different tensioner for it. But these are all oil-driven tensioners. So they use oil pressure to keep tension on these chains. When the oil pressure gets low in the engine, it can actually cause the chains to start slipping to where the tensioner won't hold as well, and it could cause it to jump. That's usually by that point you already have valve damage and you already have bearing damage. So when they get to that point that it doesn't have enough oil pressure to keep tension on it, oftentimes you've already destroyed a bearing or you already have massive internal damage within the engine. So that kind of negates the purpose of what we're doing if we're chasing problems like that. And that would require a whole different diagnosis that we're not going to cover in today's video. Okay, so now that I've got that stuff done and I've showed you guys all that, what we're going to do is we're going to set up and we're going to switch over to the news. And if you guys got any questions about this project or any other project, including ones of your own, chat those in now down below as I get ready to start the news. All right, so I know I hinted, I believe it was one of my Facebook guys that I was talking to. I hinted to him that there's an issue at GM. The issue at GM is a two-folded issue. It's not just one problem. So let's cover the first one, which is, in my mind, the most concerning. GM is going back into the EV market. When everyone else is running away from it in a quick fashion, GM is going back into it. This is a bad move for GM, and it's going to come back to bite them. Here's the issue, is both Dodge, Ram, Jeep, and even Stellantis have backtracked on their EV projects. Also, Ford has doubled back on their EV projects, and one of their battery plants is actually going to be a Super Duty plant. So this tells you that everyone else in the market realizes that EVs are not popular enough to start building them in a large scale. People don't want them because the ranges are not good enough to where people feel safe enough. There's other issues related to the battery problems. Again, I've covered all of this. I've discussed all the issues with EVs and why I'm not a fan of them, but let's just keep marching down this and let's see where GM is going. So 2025, they will stop making gas-powered Blazers and only make the EV Blazers. This is a bad move for GM. What this is going to do is put them in a position that they're going to try to set the pace for the EV craze. Unfortunately, a lot of people are seeing the negatives right now of the EVs and don't really want to eat that cost later on when the batteries go bad. It's not just the motors. It's not just the electrical components. It's not just the potential fire hazards. It's the fact that the battery costs total out the vehicle once that battery does need to be replaced, meaning that the vehicle is only good for 10 years. Usually about that 10-year mark, the warranties run out at about 7 to 8, depending on manufacturer. So at about the 10-year mark, the batteries start going bad. The battery replacements oftentimes are at least, if not more than, $34,000. That means you're practically buying a brand new vehicle at the 10-year mark, and it's a used car. What this is doing is it's also making insurance companies not want to insure these vehicles, and loan companies to not take out loans on old EVs. This is a problem in the industry, and we can't make the batteries cheaper because the minerals we need are precious minerals. They're earth minerals, they're hard to get. Even if we strike deals with third world countries to get earth minerals, it doesn't mean that we're going to be able to make batteries any cheaper. The problem is labor cost and the associated cost to refine these minerals for the batteries. It's not just digging them out of the ground. They have to be made into the plates. The plates have to have the right composition in order to hold the electric charge properly. And when they're not made properly, the batteries are not going to last as long. This is a trickle-down effect. What we don't know is how long the aftermarket batteries that are potentially going to start coming out now on the market, how long they're going to last. If the potential batteries don't have the same longevity, you could be spending a really large amount of money on a battery that isn't even going to last as long. So where we might get 20 years out of a car like this by doing a simple timing chain that might cost us $1,000, now we're going to have to take this same car at close to about the same lifespan and mileage and put another $34,000 into it. This is why people are running away from EVs in a rapid fashion. GM has made some really bad moves when it comes to the EV side. They're diving right back into it when everyone else is running away from it. Bad move, GM. I'm going to call you out on it. I know I've got a couple of GM vehicles, but guys, I'm not brand loyal. I never have been. You guys see that I have an 04 Toyota Tacoma. I have a Kia Soul. Yes, I have the Malibu, but I bought this for fuel mileage, and I bought it off of somebody who did take care of it. I got lucky that I was able to run 144,000 miles and not do very much to this vehicle except for coil packs and plugs. That's really all I've done to this vehicle, and I've already put about 10,000 miles on this car since I bought it. Maybe a little bit more, probably about 12. That being said, this required some maintenance as well. So the timing chain needed to be done. And because the oil changes were done properly and they weren't drug out, I was able to get a little bit more life out of it. Oil changes, guys, don't ever, ever, ever go past 5,000 miles on an oil change. I don't care what the manufacturers tell you. I don't care what oil people tell you. 5,000 miles is your max on an oil change. I usually do mine at about 4, and I give myself that 1,000-mile leeway if I need to make a long trip. But usually I change mine at about 4. I run a full synthetic oil at all times with a high-grade filter. I don't use the cheap, off-the-shelf, bad filters. They don't have as many pleats in it, the filtration isn't as good, and it doesn't keep debris out. That little oil sprayer that I showed you guys has a very tiny hole in it. If anything plugs that, it will not oil the chain, it will burn up the chain guides. So you need that sprayer in there to lubricate those chain guides. If they go dry, it'll burn them up and cause the timing chain to break. And when that does, it's done. Like I said, when you smash valves in this engine, it's a $2,000 engine, not including the labor to put it in. So we don't want to destroy an engine ever when it comes to this. They're too costly, they're too time consuming, and the only reason we're going to do an engine build for Crimson Vortec, so I can show you guys some performance stuff. So I can do a little bit of extra stuff to show you guys how to squeeze performance out of older engines. And how you do that is pretty simple. If you don't ever want to change your fuel injection or your intake setup and you want to leave it somewhat stock, but you want more horsepower out of it, more performance out of it, more power out of it, you raise your compression. You can do that in 2 ways. Simply changing your heads oftentimes can raise your compression depending on the CC chamber of your heads. The lower the CC, the higher the compression. That's a pretty simple way to fix compression issues. Number 2, run flat top pistons, true flat tops. Don't do valve relief ones because obviously you're giving away compression when you do that. Why is compression so important on our modern fuels nowadays? That part is simple. Because we run ethanol in almost all of our fuels, except for our like 91 octane non-oxygenated fuels, which is what I run on any vehicle that I'm storing. Yes, I run 91 octane in the Silver Swine at all times. That Toyota always gets premium fuel. It's because I don't know how much I'm going to drive it or how long it's going to sit. Non-oxygenated fuel lasts for up to a year without having to worry about it varnishing. If it varnishes, it will destroy a fuel pump, injectors, plug up your filter. It'll do a whole bunch of bad stuff. And what's bad about it is the ethanol will try to grab on to water. And as it grabs onto that water, it creates rust. So when you see rusty fuel tanks, this is often a case of somebody running a lot of ethanol fuel. And what happens is it rusts out the tanks. You'll notice on most of the new stuff that has the yellow fuel caps, which is ethanol fuel vehicles, you'll notice that those caps are yellow. Not only that, but you'll also notice that they have plastic fuel tanks. That's to keep the tank from rusting as it stores that ethanol fuel. Because as you have condensation, heating up, cooling down, it creates condensation within that tank. That condensation gets grabbed by the ethanol, and that's what rusts out tanks. So I always try to stay away from ethanol fuels when I'm ever going to park a vehicle for an extended period of time. This thing ran about 6 tanks of premium through it before I parked it this winter. The reason I did that is I knew I wasn't going to drive it this winter because I had the deer hit and I needed to do this timing chain. Luckily, we did it, because not doing it, I would have probably wrecked the engine next year, because I would not have had a chance to shut it down like I did now to put the timing chain in it. It's wintertime. I'm not going to drive this in the salt. I don't need rust on this thing any worse than what I might already have. So I was just going to shut it down anyway. Perfect time to fix all its issues. And I need this so we can do Crimson Vortec. So that's what we got there. Next on the GM front, they are getting slapped in their hand by their faulty transmissions on their 8-speed transmissions. That's right. After the lawsuit went through, it became a massive wide recall. This recall affects almost every HD truck out there right now on the GM side. So whether it's GMC or whether it's a Chevrolet, you are going to have those transmission issues on the 8-speed transmissions. There is a recall out there for it. Make sure you guys check in. Make sure those recalls are performed. The problem is GM is trying to weasel their way out of this. And this is what they got their hand slapped for, is they kept telling people, we'll just do a transmission fluid flush and it'll fix the problem. Truth was, it wasn't fixing the problem. And the shuddering that they were getting was because of the faulty transmissions. They weren't willing to go in and do the recall because it does mean rebuilding the transmission. There are really good shops out there, guys, that will rebuild these transmissions and they'll do it right. It's harder to find those ones that do it right. So when you do, make sure you get the information from them. Make sure you share it out for other people to see. I always support my fellow shops, which gets into my last bit of news. Again, if you guys got any questions, chat them in now. We'll answer those here on the live, and we'll see if we can help you guys with your project. Again, today's video was on timing chains, and the timing chain on this one was pretty needed to be done. I would not have felt safe running this vehicle another season without doing that timing chain. It was loose, very loose. I'll cover this gasket set here. I'm not going to flip the camera around. So the number is going to be backwards for you guys. Sorry about that, but this is your part number for your Felt Pro. In here, there is another seal. That seal is for your harmonic balancer. Since you're going to have it apart at this point, it doesn't hurt to check your belt tensioner or possibly replace your serpentine belt. They have to come off anyway. If they don't look very good or they haven't been changed, just change them. They don't cost that much money, and it's well worth it to put the new parts on so that you don't have to go back in there. The worst thing I hate doing is doing a big project like this, and I start reusing a bunch of parts. And the more I reuse, the more I find that I'm going back in later and replacing those components that were, maybe I shouldn't have ran them. So I've always gone with the motto, if I take it out, I look at it. If it isn't good, I replace it. And one of them that I am replacing is the belt tensioner. Belt tensioner is making noise. The bearing makes noise when you spin it. And the spring is getting a little weak. So not worth rerunning that. All right, so last bit of news, guys. As we get into this, we're starting to look at shops. Repair shops, currently, there is a bill on the House floor. So make sure you guys call your legislative people and tell them to not vote for this. Because what it's going to do is force all repair shops to charge what dealers charge. This is being done by the large manufacturer dealerships. So your Fords, your Chevys, your Dodge, your Nissans, they're the ones, you could even say Kia, all of your major dealerships are pushing for this bill to go through, because what this is going to do is put the repair shops on the same playing field as the dealerships. And what this does is it actually limits the ability of the repair shops to do some of these repairs. Because a lot of times if there's specialty tools, the dealership gets those from the manufacturer at a very discounted rate. When you open up your own repair shop, you have to buy those tools, and they're usually sold to you at a markup. So now it becomes an issue of we have to pay more money to be a repair shop just because we have to cover additional cost for additional tooling that we need every time a new maker model comes out. This bill threatens small repair shops, and it really does target them to say, we're going to make sure you can't do your job. We're going to make it a lot harder for you to be in the repair business. This is something I fight against all the time, guys. I hate it when they do this kind of garbage, and I really do hate the way that they treat the repair shops, because a lot of small repair shops are small for a reason. They're small because they're trying to do the best service that they possibly can for their customers and have a good clientele. That clientele is what makes the business. If you look at shops that are selling, sorry, I'm going to pick on the shops right now, but I need to also. You look at a small shop, you have to ask yourself, where is their revenue coming from? How are they making their money? How are they keeping their lights on? And if they're doing it through just writing stuff off, the repair shop is at the point that it's going to fail. If the shop is making money on its external things it does, such as maybe merchandise, or it does it off of other things, videos, if they're doing that, that is a completely different deal. Now you're not really a repair shop, you're more of education, entertainment, that kind of thing. So if you're going that route, that's a whole nother story. Honestly, guys, a lot of what I do is a little bit of educational and a little bit of entertaining. That's why I had you vote on the engine, because I wanted to bring you guys some cool content and show you guys how we can make horsepower and not spend a ton of money doing it. So this will be a good project for that after we get this bad boy finished. Malibu steel, I knew was going to be a big project. When the bumper cover was, it's tore. I mean, it's torn several pieces. When I hit that deer, I knew already that I was shutting this car down and I was going to be going through it. There's 2 more line items I'm a little nervous on, but I need to do really before I put this car back into service. Not just get this thing put back together, but I need to consider struts, and I need to do something about the tires. The tires on here, the back ones go flat. I could check for nails, but at this point, I don't know if it's even the valve stems that are leaking really, or if it's the seals around the bead. So my goal is, once I get this done, get the bumper cover on it, get the engine all buttoned up, get it ran, make sure everything's running good and smooth. My goal is to take the front tires off, get new tires put on it, put those tires back on, lift up the rear, pull those tires off, and then go do those. If you guys want to see tire videos, guys, hit that like button down below. Make sure you guys hit the like button on the video. Give me a thumbs up right now if you guys want to see tire videos on the Malibu Steel. I need to know where we want to make some more content for you guys. It would be good to show you guys ones that are leaking so that you guys understand where those leaks come from. Not a lot of people that do videos will show you guys, hey, this is where it was leaking. This is why it's leaking. This is why your tires might be leaking. You know, this will be a good video for you guys if you guys want to go that route and we can see that different content. But yes, guys, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, because we really do want to build this channel this year. We are trying to grow. I'm trying to make more reels on my other sites that I do, but this is where I do all my lives. This is where I do all of my entertainment stuff. This is where I do my videos. At some point, I want to get back into doing clips, and I'll probably clip off of my lives when I do like content like this. I'll find a good section of content and just clip it and make it a separate clip for you guys that I can drop throughout the week, just to kind of get people coming back to the live that we record every Saturday at 1 p.m. Central. Now, we came in late, guys, today. We really did. And the reason I came in late today was I needed to make sure that my timing marks were right. I needed to make sure that everything went back together good, and it was straight and it was true before I did my video for you guys. I did not want to bring you back in and have the timing marks off or have something look weird. It took time to set this up. So because of that, we got a late start. I apologize for that, guys. I will work on getting on that schedule of 1 p.m. Central Time. That way you guys know when I'm going to be here and you guys can tune in. Again, you guys can always chat in your questions. I like to hear from you guys. I'd like to help you guys out with your projects. It's important to give back, which is why I do this. Bill again, my mod. Thank you for the information. No problem. I really do hope this helps anyone with the 2.4 liter, either GM. It's probably going to be GM. I know that the kit was for other vehicles. In fact, let me grab that. Okay. Oh, let's do a little bit deeper dive into this, shall we? Wrong sheet, but I do want to cover this. All right. So this one, I think this is just, that's got different kit numbers on it. So this sheet here has a bunch of different kit numbers on it. And this says what they're for. So this just comes in the kit. So this is the company that actually made the kit that Napa sells. So this is your part numbers. I already got this one full of oil, so I can't really clean this up and post it for you guys on a post. I could probably start doing that on some of these that we're doing parts for. I could do these posts and do this as a post on YouTube for you guys, or on Facebook or Instagram where I am. I do my clips over there right now, which is just kind of a pre-launch for my videos every week. I do Facebook and Instagram. So here's the timing chain set, kind of covers what's going on. This is what it shows for our tensioner, or our hand grenade. And this is for the Ecotec That's the Spanish side. How about I try to read the English side? So down here, it shows the tensioner for the piston. This is what we're putting the pry bar on, and we tap on it. When we tap on this, it'll pop out. That is the release for this tensioner. We want to release that tensioner before we start putting covers on. If we don't release that tensioner, it's not going to do any good. The chain is going to jump. So we do need to release that tensioner, and then that tensioner will get oil. That oil will put pressure on it and keep the chain tight. That's what it does. All right, you guys have any other last questions? Please chat those in now. Next week, we are going to be taking our old bumper apart, and we're going to pull everything off that's still good that we want to keep. So next week is going to be a bumper kind of salvaging whatever we can off of the old one. If I get time, I'm going to start reassembling the new bumper. So the new bumper's here, painted to match, got it off of eBay. Great place to get parts that are color matched. The reason we do color matched is so that the vehicle doesn't look weird. We're trying to show that the vehicle isn't damaged. So if we go throwing a different bumper cover on it, we're already telling people, big red flag, hey, I hit something. If we do a color match bumper, it shows that the vehicle isn't damaged. There are small little ways to tell. I'll show you guys that next week when we're doing the bumper. There are small, tiny little imperfections in the bumper. And this is the difference between a sort of fit bumper and an OEM bumper. It's just those little differences will help you tell if the vehicle has had bumper damage. If you don't know what you're looking for and you're just, I need a daily driver, you might overlook these little minor differences, but these minor differences do show. So if you know what you're looking for, you'll be able to say, hey, this is exactly what's going on. But next week, we are going to do that teardown on the bumper. We're going to strip off all of the stuff that's bad. We're going to bolt it onto the new bumper. We're also going to start getting our wheel liner back in it, and we're going to start getting everything put back together. You guys will not see me put this motor back together because I'm going to do this off camera because I want this off the jack. I do not want to leave this on the oil pan any longer than I have to today. This is a one-day deal, and I make sure that nobody hits that jack, because if they hit that jack while it's supporting the engine, it will drop down and break the oil pan. That just complicates the repair and adds a lot more cost. So we do not want that to happen. The sooner we can get this back up onto the motor mount, the safer we will be. So our goal today, between me and a friend of mine, we're going to try to button this up later today, get it back onto the motor mount. Now that doesn't mean I'm going to have the valve cover back on it, but I do want to have the rest of the covers on it so that I can put all of the front timing or the front components on it. I want to put the harmonic balancer on it, the tensioner, the belt. I want to put my timing chain cover on it. I want to get all that stuff bolted up. So once that's done, then I'm going to work about trying to get the rest of the car put back together so we can start putting this bumper cover on in the next week or two. Again, if you guys want to see tire videos, make sure you guys comment down below. Hit the like button. Guys, you don't understand how much that really does help a channel. When you guys hit those like buttons and the subscribe buttons, the more engagement that the channel has, the more it gets pushed in the algorithm, the better the videos do, and the more content we can bring you. So any of your favorite content creators, make sure you guys are supporting us because it really does help. I watch quite a few other ones. I'm not going to name drop because it's not a good thing to do. I don't like doing that, but I have my favorites that I watch, and I've watched them for a long time. Now, one of mine, they're from Texas, and they were in Hawaii, and that's all I'm going to give you for information. He does a lot of cool stuff. I like what he's doing. He's currently doing a garage project. He makes awesome content. But again, I'm not going to name drop because I don't want to cause any filtering issues between the two channels. I don't know him personally, so I don't want to do that. But again, guys, thank you for all the support. And again, we're going to bring you guys more content. We're going to be doing that engine build soon. I got to locate the engine that I want. I want to try to get an engine that has about 170K on it, maybe a little bit less. I don't want a motor that has 200, 250 on it. I don't want that many miles. I want a lower mile engine. That way I can hopefully find one that doesn't have too much wear in the engine. I don't want to have to do a line bore. That gets to be really expensive and we have to pay for oversized bearings. I don't want to have to do a bunch of weird stuff to the block because it's wore out. We may or may not bore the block. That will be determined after the teardown. Again, there's going to be a lot we're going to cover in the engine build, and I'm going to take it step by step each week with you. When I do that teardown, I'm not going to clip anything. I'm not going to do anything off camera. This project I did off camera because the timing is so crucial. I needed to make sure the marks were lined up. We needed to make sure that the slack on the chain when we released that tensioner was on the side where the tensioner was. So that means the rest of our chain had to be tight all the way around down to where that slack adjuster was. That's why we started late. That's why I needed to make sure this project was done right. I did not want to show you guys something that wasn't right or that wasn't going to work for your guys' application. And these little tricks are good things to know when doing timing. Remember, slack always towards your tensioner. So if you remember that and you remember, make sure your marks are right where you need them before you start, you can't go wrong on the timing. Again, there's one other trick I'm going to show you guys here at the very end before I sign off with you guys. It's called a cross wrench technique. I believe I talked about it a little bit here. I'm going to dive into this because this is a really, really cool trick that you can do with these engines. And it really, really does help. All right. So on these engines, here's your hex. You can run a wrench this way and a wrench up from that way, and you put a vice grips on it. That locks your cams. Your cams will not move once you put those wrenches on it and vice grip it. The reason you're doing that is so that your valves don't jump. You don't want your cams to jump and spin. You don't want the springs to create uneven pressure and for it to bottom out on one of the pistons. And yes, that does happen. It can happen very quickly. And without putting those wrenches on there and vice gripping them, you're not locking the cams into place. Anytime you do timing like this, make sure you lock your cams. Whether you use a cam lock tool, you can't use a cam lock tool when you're doing the timing chain on this one because you need to remove the cams. That being said, that's why they have the hex heads down on the cams. So you can run a cross wrench setup with the pliers squeezing the two wrenches together. Once you do that, those cams aren't moving. You're not going to be able to pull it up because the wrenches are in at an angle. So they're going to be locked in at an angle. They won't pull up. The only thing that could happen is if the vice grip comes undone, the wrenches could open up and then the cams could spring. And when the cams spring, that's when it could potentially drive a valve down into a piston. You don't want that. You'll damage your engine. So thank you guys for watching on this Saturday. Next week, we're going to do that bumper teardown and we're going to start getting this car put back together. We're also going to look at what we're going to do for struts, and I'll be talking with you guys a little bit more about that next week. We're going to probably do some tires. Oh, we've got one here. Mr. Turbo 6. I'm letting my 2.4 clap away. Does this have a severe burning or severe oil burning issue? No. Actually, there was a video I made on why these engines are using oil, and it pertains to the valve cover bypass that we did. What this does is it removes the potential of it pulling oil out of the top of the valve cover and dumping it back into the top of the intake. Oftentimes that's where a lot of your oil's going if you're not noticing a lot of blue smoke coming out of the back of your car. If you're seeing blue smoke, that means your rings have failed and you're burning a ton of oil. Once you get to that point, your engine's pretty much toast anyway. It doesn't really pay to do a whole lot to it. But the oil bypass, or I should say, valve cover bypass, is really simple to do. Here it is, this little guy. And the reason we put a filter on it, just so that we can keep dirt and dust out of the engine. The reason we want to keep dust and dirt out of the engine, half of this bottle is all the dirt that your engine can take for its entire lifetime. Half. Once it's taken half of that bottle, the engine's cooked. The rings are already destroyed, and you will more than likely either have to bore or hone the cylinders to get it to reseal back up. So if you are burning that kind of oil, oil rings are another good place that it allows oil to get to the top of the cylinders. So if you have oil rings that are seized up, and that could also lead to compression loss issues. Here's the thing, when we do that engine for Crimson Vortec, we're actually in an issue here where those engines from factory had very low compression, like ridiculously low, like 8-to-1. It was something really low, meaning that they lowered the horsepower on those engines by lowering the compression. When we raise the compression of that engine, we're going to raise the horsepower of that engine. That's going to be our biggest trick to that when we do that. But yes, if you're having severe oil burning issues and you're not noticing it leaking, you're not noticing blue smoke out the exhaust, you need to do that bypass, because what's happening is it's circulating back into the top of your intake. I looked into the bypass. Oh, you just retracted the message there, so I couldn't respond back to you. I will look into that bypass. Yeah, simply all I did was I got a 90-degree elbow from a plumbing hardware store, and I bought the small little tiny filters that you can buy. Those small tiny filters you can get at any auto parts store. They're often in a place where they keep the ones that are for cold air or warm air intakes. They got the little breather ones right there. I just did the 90-degree elbow and that. What you have to remember, though, is you have to plug the intake side, meaning you have to cap that because you can't have a vacuum leak or an air leak there. What happens if you have that air leak going in, that's air getting passed after the sensor. Let me grab my intake. All right, here's my intake. Okay. So here's my intake. Right here. Here's my bypass. So this is just a piece of hose that I squeezed onto here. It's basically deformed to fit, so it's not going to leak. And then I put a wheel stud in here and put a clamp on it. So now this intake doesn't have any leaks. We don't want this to leak air because there's a sensor, usually a mass airflow sensor, that sits over here. That mass airflow sensor reads the incoming air. So anything that leaks past that sensor will cause engine issues. It'll cause fuel consumption issues and a whole bunch of bad stuff. So we don't want any leaks after that sensor. So we need to make sure we cap this, and then the other piece was just putting that filter on it that I showed you. So what that does is it bypasses it so that it can't suck it back into the engine. Now, another way to do it is oftentimes people put oil catch cans on. I've talked about oil catch cans, but I haven't installed one for you guys yet. I might look into doing an oil catch can video for you guys, just so that you guys kind of know what those oil catch cans are and kind of how they work. Pretty basic though. There's really nothing all too complicated to running an oil catch can. The problem is oil catch cans need to be dumped. And if you don't dump them, then they're not going to do any good because they're just going to fill up and then dump it right back into the engine. So you have to dump those pretty often. When you do the filter, you never got to worry about it. The problem is emissions. If you live in a state that you have to worry about emissions testing, what I just showed you doesn't work. You will fill your emissions and you will have to deal with it. One thing that people do is they've gotten smart, so they don't cut any of their factory hoses. They get all new hoses. They'll disconnect everything and put it back to the way it should be from factory. They'll run it through, do their emissions. They'll bring it back home and switch it back out. It's one way to beat the emissions. But just know, if you do that bypass with the filter and you are in emission state, you will get flagged and you won't get your certification. So, something to know. Mr. Turbo 6, what vehicle are you working on? Mine is an Equinox. I am working on a Chevy Malibu, the 2.4 liter. We just kind of already covered all the timing chain stuff. We did this whole video, so if you came in this late, you might have to scroll back and rewatch the video. I show you guys all the timing marks. I show you a service bulletin update that allows you to kind of see that updated piece or bolt as it be, and that keeps you from having basically timing chain guide wear issues. I have my way around the emissions. Oh yeah, so do I. You're in the game long enough, you figure out ways around it. Again, you don't want to upset the EPA too much, but if you get an engine that's really bad and really making a bunch of nasty smells, I can tell you doing the bypass on that one over there, that didn't go very well. The reason it didn't go very well is it really started to stink. Wound up getting a bunch of issues there. So I did take the valve cover bypass back off of Champagne Bubbles, and I'm not going to put it back on there. Instead, we are going to do a valve cover upgrade on that. It's got a plastic valve cover. I hate it. Plastic valve covers don't keep the pressure, meaning that higher compression. I hate that the manufacturers even went this route. So newer ethanol fuels, they bump the compression up to get fuel mileage up, to get horsepower up, to maximize what a four-cylinder can do. But then they put a plastic valve cover on it. And what happens is that higher compression creates more windage in the bottom of the oil pan, aka blow-by, and it puts too much air pressure to the top of the engine. And you'll notice this by when you remove your oil cap, how much air comes out of it. Champagne Bubbles it's crazy how much air comes out. It'll spit oil out once you take the oil cap off. I am honestly thinking the rings are shot in that and they just don't want to cover it. Unfortunately, we have a warranty for 200,000 miles or 20 years. So if it goes bad in that time, they're putting an engine in that. I'm not. So that's why we bought that. And if it comes down to it that it just becomes too much of a hassle, we're going to probably trade that off on probably a Jeep Wrangler or something like that. The person who drives that one has been eyeing the two-door Jeep Wranglers. So there may be a change coming in the channel when it comes to that side of things. But that is something for much later in the future, not today, not anytime in the near future. But I wanted to bring that up to you guys. Again, thank you guys for all the support. I do have to let you go because I want to get this engine wrapped up today. And I do have to do some other things for my shop here before I call it a day. But thank you guys for all the support. Continue hitting the like button, the subscribe button, ringing that notification bell so you get notified when I go live, which is every Saturday at 1 p.m. Central Time. Again, thank you guys for all the support, and I'll see you on the next one.